So I don't want to sacrifice everything under the assumption that like, it has to be now. Now I'm at my best now.
Yeah.
I just want to make those investments and like, how do I take care of the business and myself so that there's opportunity that like maybe the best years are actually ahead of me if I don't burn myself out now.
Shay and Graham. Oh my gosh. I miss you guys, first of all, so much. And this is like
Virtual hugs.
I know. This, like we were saying, like this makes me just want to be with you in person. And also I just want to be in all the many places that are in the background of Shay's photos right now.
All
I'm
over
like,
the world.
that looks incredible. I'm so thankful for you guys taking the time to do this. I reached out because I have long been inspired by the two of you and the choices you make regarding running your business. We're going to dig into this, really get into the specifics of it, but you work a very limited number of hours a week on your businesses, yet you don't let that shape how seriously you take those businesses. And I wanted to have it in particular for the slow growth season, because one of the things that I talk about in that book is for people who are wired to be achievers, about the worst thing we can hear is, oh, you should just rest, because we're like, and then what? What do I, it's like Ricky Bobby, what do I do with my hands? And I think so many of us can hear that if we give up achieving for our worth, then we may as well just sit down and like quit on life, that we have to give up achieving to go along with it. Or, some other ways to put it, if we have this limiting belief that if I only have a set number of hours to work on something, it therefore must also be as small as the amount of time that I have. Or if I say no to hustle culture, it also means saying no to success. So first of all, I just wanted to like welcome you guys on, say hello to everybody. And like, I know you guys have a lot of opinions on this. So let's just jump in right there.
Man, I love that. Hopefully you'll accept all our opinions, because they are just those, they are opinions, but people can take them or leave them. But thanks for having us, Mary. We love you guys. Yeah.
So let's just start with Shay. I want to start because one of the things that I saw and I reached out to you about was you actually do about 16 hours a week on your business, or exactly 16 hours a week on your business. And the post I saw most recently, you were even talking about dividing that time up where you spend half on creative and half on CEO. So how did you get to 16 hours?
For punishment.
Yeah. Tell me all the things. How did that come about?
Yeah, the origin is very unimpressive. It came about because I could only afford 2 days of childcare when I started my business. So back in those days, I was just getting started. I was just transitioning from wedding and portrait photography into commercial photography and product styling. And I had a new baby at home, and I didn't juggle both of those well at the same time. I know some people can like do their work with a baby on their hip and be answering emails and I couldn't, for a lot of very deep reasons. It feels way more rewarding to be a business owner at times than it feels to be a mom of a newborn. So I just had a lot going on internally. And I felt myself resenting motherhood instead of resenting the work that I had to do. And that was kind of a wake up call for me. Like, wow, I really want to be a mom. I genuinely don't love my work more than I love being a mom, but there's just a solid tension happening when I try to do both at the same time. And so I was like, I've got to separate these out so that I can be free to be 150 million% in my business when I'm in my business, and I can be free to be 150 million% in being a mom when I have my kids in front of me. So that just brought up some questions. Okay, how can I do this? How can I separate it out? What's it going to take? What am I okay with? And that looked like, well, how much childcare can we afford? Can we get somebody to come into our home? Can I send Chloe to a loving, sweet other person's house that wasn't mine, so I could get some work done, and we could afford 2 days of childcare? So that's kind of origin of the 16 hours. And I think what I realized along the way, once I got into that rhythm, was that that was about the line for me where I would start to resent the work, or just be really overly exhausted by it. And it would begin to take a lot out of me on my non-work days. So people have always asked over the years, especially when my kids went back to school, because now they're much older, they go to school 5 days a week. If I want to work more days, like, oh, you've got all this time now. Do you want to work more days? And I really genuinely don't want to work more days.
Yeah.
Partially because of just, again, knowing my sweet spot for like my peak performance with work. When I add more hours, I start to add more just stupid tasks that really don't need to be done and that wear me out and exhaust me. And then I have like a lot of other things in life that I love, friends and facials and, you know, going for walks and cleaning my house and sitting outside. Like there's a lot of other things I love too. So I want to make time and space for those things. So 16 hours has stuck, and we're probably almost 12 years in to 16 hours.
I want to pause right there for everybody who's listening, and we're also going to get into this a little bit more here in a second. But if you're listening and you heard Shay say facials and walking around and enjoying life, what I don't want you to hear is must be nice. That it must be nice that these guys were operating from a place where they just had all of this money and just all of this luxury, and you know that we're talking to like a lady who lunches here. Instead, you know, we're going to talk about how you guys started very, very small. You had, I mean, we'll get into your story. There were no facials in the beginning. The question I have for you before we even get there, though, is, you know, when you were looking at this time, because it is interesting, there are studies that say 3 to 5 hours max productive. You know, we're actually getting stuff done. After that, it really tapers off. Yeah. So that really lines up with the work week you're talking about. When you were looking at that in the beginning, were you accepting that limiting belief of it might mean I have to trade off success in my business, but the overall picture of success, it's worth it? Like, did you operate from were you surprised when you were still able to start seeing some traction?
There's a lot of different components to the answer to that question. I definitely felt one thing that you didn't necessarily mention. I definitely felt like if I'm only doing it 16 hours, I must not really be serious about it. And I definitely felt that in the industry compared to, we had kids young in our marriage. So weren't a lot of other people that were having kids, and felt that same like weird tension of how I spend my time and the value of that. So I remember feeling like 16 hours is not a legitimate business. If I tell people I work part-time, they will immediately think, oh, it's a side hustle, or it must be small, or it must not be profitable, or it must just be, you know, like a hobby that she does. That's cute. So I remember feeling that. I also remember a lot of conversations with Graham about what success looks like to us. Yeah. Is success only financial? Is success joy? Is it loving what we do? Is it an amount of time? Is it a certain lifestyle? You know, what is it? Is it a certain internal, emotional, spiritual, physical, family health? So we had a lot of conversations about that. I remember that at the time. I don't know if I ever, Graham, you'll have to keep me honest here. In those early days, 12 years ago, I don't know how much I struggled with how profitable and awesome it could be in my limited 16 hours a week, only because it just had to be that way. So it has always had to grow slow for me. There was not an option. Maybe because I knew 16 hours was just the max I wanted to give it. So I do now often feel like, man, it takes us 3 months to do what would take one entrepreneur with 40 hours a week, 6 hours to do. It's so frustratingly slow at times to only give it 16 hours a week. I feel that now. I don't know if I felt that at the time, partially because we were so broke that if I brought in $5 in a week, it was like a major win. So, it's all context. I struggle with that more now. Yeah. Like, man, what could it be if I had more time?
Right. So when you have those moments, and let's say maybe you even look around at some people who are quote unquote the competition, who are doing similar spaces, who you can tell are really like putting in a lot of hours and doing like the hustle and the grind, and even like talking about the hustle and the grind. When that temptation comes in of like, oh, well, what if just like in this for this season, right? There's like that meme that's like being a grown up is saying, I've just got to get through this life or this week that's really crazy, and then it'll be fine, and you just do that over and
Till
over.
next week.
Till next week. So when you feel that temptation of like, well, what if we just for now bumped it up to 20? What if we just bumped it up to 22? Like, what is the thought process you take yourself through to recenter on what you've decided success looks like for you?
I think one thing that helps me is that my other days are really full of things that I want to be doing, relationships I want to be investing in.
Yeah.
Things I want to be doing. I've made a lot of choices about what I want to do at that time. So it's not often that I'm sitting around and thinking, oh, I could just go up and do a few more hours of work and I would make so much more progress. I really love what I do with my off days. And those days are really important to me. Those are because I'm so head down in my work days. And I feel like I'm putting in such an exhausting amount of effort because it's such a consolidated time. I really value the off days is when I get to connect with people and just enjoy the richness of the rest of life. So there's not a lot of that tension. Now, I think there are definitely seasons that are super busy.
Yeah.
There are definitely seasons that take more time. I think that Graham and I have both learned to be patient with those seasons in each other's business, but also still always holding the same standard. Like the standard in our house is like, you're not working after 5 o'clock. So if you're working, like, okay, I understand you have a launch tomorrow or something went wrong and it really needs your attention, but it's never become the norm. And it's never because there's just always still that tension of like, this isn't what we want. This is irregular. That kind of keeps, I think, us both always wanting to veer back. There's so much more there, but well, Graham, I'm counting on you to keep me honest about. There's such a huge difference. Also,
so far so good.
Like, what 16 hours looks and feels like now versus 12 years ago is just night and day difference. So,
well, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about, it started from necessity, and then you started doing it, and you realized, like you said, okay, when I know I only have 16 hours, I mess around. I'm not scrolling the internet. I'm not, looking at other people's lives. I am getting in and I'm getting stuff done. So talk about the first few times you started to realize like, whoa, I actually don't feel like I'm losing that much by putting this, it's a limit, but it doesn't feel limiting. Yeah. And some things you started to see gain traction in your business. Yeah.
I think one of the biggest things, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, but Graham and I both are of the mindset that boundaries like that are not hindrances to growth. They're actually catalysts for growth. And I think we both kind of accepted that idea really early on, whether it was out of necessity or just because it like clicked in our brains. But the limitation of 16 hours forces you to decide very carefully and strategically about how you will use that time. And then what's great about that is that you decide, or you figure out, you identify the things that you're doing that are actually generating the most revenue, that are actually having the largest impact. And with your limited amount of time, you double and triple and quadruple down your effort just on those things. So what happens is actually the opportunity for exponential growth, exponential impact, exponential profitability, because you have the boundary of that little sliver of time or whatever the boundary is that you've, placed there. So I think for both Graham and I, one of the reasons why there was success despite, and continues to be success despite a very limited amount of hours given to it, is that principle of identifying the thing that is actually moving the business forward and just doubling and tripling down on that. So early on, I think we both understood, again, whether it was out of necessity or whatever it was, that there was something there was something powerful there. And we started to see traction on that now. And the same, that was very true then. The same is true, just as true now. It just looks different now. I have a team, and now I'm, splitting my 16 hours again to make sure that there's CEO time and creative time and things like that. But it all has always, I think, over the last 12 years come down to making sure that we were constantly identifying and re-identifying what really had the biggest impact, the highest ROI on our use of time. So that actually, to me, and I think Graham would argue the same, it made it easier and it made it more freeing. I don't know that either of us have ever felt like, man, we're so limited by the amount of time that we're working, because we saw that mechanism start to play out like, wow, actually, I was way more productive and profitable in just that 6-hour day than I would have been if it had been, a 40-hour work week or whatever it is. So I think we saw that early on and we're like, this is awesome. Yeah. I'm going to stick with this.
Yeah. What you're talking about there, and Graham talks about this in his book, is the idea of the Pareto Principle, this idea that 20% of your inputs will give you 80% of your outputs. So real quick, and then we'll bring Graham in on this. What's an example, like a real specific example of something you were doing early on in your business that when you put it through that 80-20 test, you were like, this is taking too much time for not enough results. And you kind of did that, like, kill your darling, really tough, ruthless editing of your own business. What's something you let go of because you're like, this just isn't carrying its own weight?
I have really let go of personal Instagram over the years. That's just not something that in this season of life and the work that I do. Now, we have obviously like a professional account and there's time and attention given to that. But me showing up on the internet is not helping social squares to grow necessarily. And it's just, when I choose how I want to spend my time, I've kind of just chosen other things. Lots of time in email, lots of time, for me now, it's like problem solving for people. It's not helpful for the business. Big picture, we see a much better return when people are able to think for themselves and have the autonomy and the right amount of information and expectation to then go and just crush that side of the business without my input. So now it's like, productivity and ROI is like me removing myself and being a better leader and enabling people to do good work. So it's not micromanaging. It's not being a bottleneck. It's not being a part of a lot of workflows is what it looks like now. Back then it was like taking work you don't love. Spending a lot of time online scrolling. There's like, I could probably list for you 50,000 things that are not a great use of time as a business owner that we all fall into if given enough time. Fall into it.
I've actually been we've been putting out my new writing course, and one of the things that we talked about in the module on writer's block is this great quote that's like, writer's block is a problem of having too much time on your hands.
Interesting.
Right? Like we all manage to get the paper done for the class just by midnight or whatever. And like when we have real hard deadlines, like we actually get the work done that
that's and that, just to jump in, Mary, that's Parkinson's law, right? That work will expand to fill the time you give it for completion. Everything will expand to give it whatever time. So if that is true, the more you think about it. And so I think people who are successful and efficient have decided to limit the amount of time because it'll still get done magically somehow.
That's right.
You get focused.
Right. And Graham, let's bring you in from that side. First of all, I alluded to this earlier, but I'm ready to just like roll up our sleeves and jump right into it. We go into this in a lot of detail in the first episode you guys were on. So once you guys finish listening to this one, go check that out about getting out of debt. But talk a little bit about the place you guys found yourself. You've just moved to Florida, you moved to Tampa, and it's like 2008, 2009. So just set a scene for us a decade plus ago. Where were you guys finding yourself?
Don't make me go back to the dark.
It's going to be a super fun, lighthearted conversation.
Counseling session. So we moved to Tampa in 2009 to help some friends start a church down here. And it just became a shift in our history of our family, in that up until then we had been normal people with jobs and middle-class college-educated people that were doing fine. And then when we got down here, I lost 2 jobs that year. And we were trying to just make money when I lost the job that I got down here after we had bought our house. Our first daughter was born, and Shay was freelancing a bit with photography. I was freelancing with music, and it was kind of in between jobs. And then the thought was, well, maybe I don't need a job. Maybe I could just ramp up the freelancing business. And so I started to do that a bit, making content online. And it was in that period where we weren't making enough money. Yeah. We applied for food stamps, and unfortunately we qualified, which means we weren't doing very well financially. So we were on food stamps for 18 months. Yeah. My little brother was sending us money. It was a really, I use the word embarrassing. I felt embarrassed. I didn't want people to know like that I wasn't able to provide. And also I wasn't actively looking for a job. So that was hard. People understand when you're struggling, but they're assuming you're looking for a job. And I wasn't. I was blogging and I was trying to do freelance work. And so it was a confusing time. But the great news is that Shay and I think what's so great is that we were really unified in it. And there was never a question of like, does this make sense? I mean, none of it made sense, but we didn't disagree that like I should pursue this. And we were in unity there. So yeah, it was a dark time, but it turned around for both of us in terms of like, it changed the direction of where we were going in our careers.
Yeah. You say, we'll just set it up just to really drive this point home. I said 2008, 2009, height of the Great Recession, of just gotten a mortgage for yourselves, and you lose not one but two jobs in the space of that year. You say, I was in a new and unfamiliar place with no job, few prospects, and absolutely zero vision for my future. I felt like a total failure. I was scared, frustrated, and embarrassed. At one point, we were on food stamps. I was at the lowest point of my life. And it occurs to me that we're coming, 2 years on the other side of a pandemic. Hopefully we're moving to the other side of a pandemic. And there are probably a lot of people listening right now who may be living a very similar story right now. Jobs may have completely dried up. They may have just realized this is sucking the life out of me. I can't keep going on this way at this kind of job. And there's this glimmer of like, okay, Mary was not kidding. This was not facials and massages and ladies who lunch, like from the ground up. There's this glimmer of hope that's starting to maybe like take spark in them. And Graham, you were figuring this out as you went. You started blogging, not because you had this like vision of everything it could turn into. You just took the next step of maybe I can get clients from this. So talk a little bit about like what were you surprised to find out when you were blogging to get clients? What did it actually turn into?
Yeah, that's a great point. Definitely no vision for this. So I want people to understand that it was just one step at a time, and I was fearful the entire time. But there was always a reason, well, maybe this would work, because everyone's smarter than they think they are. So the thought was, yeah, maybe if I put myself on the internet, I have a better chance of people finding me than if I don't. So that was about as far as I took it. And the hope was to get more freelance clients. I started a YouTube channel in January of 2010 to accompany the blog. And I was just sort of showing some of the work I was doing on the little bit of client work I had and teaching people a bit, hoping it would be a credibility play. Like people would see, wow, he's really good at what he does. And then they would hire me. And that actually works, by the way. What interestingly enough happened was more people were finding the videos and the blog posts who were like, hey, I don't really want to hire somebody. I want to do it myself. I want to learn more. Would you keep doing more of these videos and teach me how to do this? Could you do a video on this? Or what about this? And I got really good questions. I got people saying like, wow, no one's explained it this way to me before. And they were asking me to be a teacher and to be a YouTuber before that was like a thing. And I was like, I can't make money off of that. So that's nice. I'll do that in between gigs when I have time on my hands, because I'm currently unemployed. So I have lots of time, but that's not what I want to do. I want to get client work. And to your point about with Shay, about like seeing what really scales your business, I learned early on, once I figured out some of the digital product side of things, I sell online courses, I sell memberships. I learned early on that, wow, I could just do client work and keep raising my rates, but I actually could make a lot more money and work a lot less if I put my effort onto the product side. And so I've had to make those decisions too, of what I thought I wanted, a thriving freelance business, turns out wasn't the best use of my time. Yeah. And so I took my skills and applied it just in a different way.
Yeah, I love that. And the next point this brings me to, and this is something that I really want to underscore, because if anyone is listening and you are tempted to feel like, oh gosh, like, passive income, I feel like you talk about this in the book, Graham, that anytime somebody talks about passive income, it starts to feel like, and now I will sign you up for this thing, or like, overnight success. And what I love that you talk about in the book, and what I love that both of you have talked about in your story, is that you are saying you can do this quickly in terms of hours in a day, but long haul over time. And one of the words you use in the book, Graham, is this idea of long game. And I really like perked up at that, because that's actually the two words, the phrase that I chose for this year is I just want to play the long game instead of trying to, hurry up and get to the result, or hurry up and, skip all the, let me skip to the good part, that like reel that's going around, and just do the work, right? Do the foundation that this thing can stand on for years and years. For me, with selling books and being an author, but also for the course side, and Graham, for you being an author now too. And just, gosh, like, I feel like there's something to be said here of like, if you are tempted to like be like, nope, passive income, la la la, sounds good, it's for other people, not for me, and like close your ears and tune out. What I want you to hear is these guys are talking about building this right over the long haul, and it might take a while. So there's a quote you reference from Warren Buffett where you say, he talks about the reason it doesn't work for most people is most people want to get rich quick. They don't want to do the work to get rich slow. So when you both think about your businesses, and there is this like tension of like, we're doing it quickly by the week, we're doing it over the long haul by the year. Just talk about the patience and what keeps you kind of moving forward when it's tempting to say, this is going so much faster for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much good stuff there. Tony Robbins has this great quote that people overestimate what they can do in a year, but they underestimate what they can do in a decade.
Yeah.
And so if you just internalize that one line, it could change your life, because the long game is like, assume you're going to live a long life, because to not do that is to be a pessimist. And what's the point of living? But assume you're going to live a long life. If you assume that, then how do you want to set up your life long term? Like, it is hard to change your life overnight. It is hard, and everybody wants that. It is much more realistic to change your life over 5 to 10 years. And I think that takes the pressure off of fake goals, weird goals, because the pressure makes you do desperate things. Desperate things lead you to do dumb things, or things that work quickly but then aren't sustainable. Use that language. When I'm coaching people in their businesses, they never like what I say because they want it faster.
Yeah.
And what's the tactic now, Graham? The thing that's working in 2022. I'm like, look, you can find ways to make money now, but it's unsustainable. You will burn out, or your family will suffer, or your health will suffer. So why not ask questions like, can I do this for 5 to 10 years? Like the way you're setting up your work week, the way you're setting up your membership site, the way you're setting up your content or social media calendar, how much you promote. That's great. You could do that for a month or a year. Could you do this for 5 to 10 years? If the answer is no, it's too much, or it's the wrong model for your life or business. So I think if you're willing to succeed long-term, you almost get to decide the rules, because you can also win now. And this is what Shay and I try to do, and what she alluded to. You can choose to win now by deciding what you want your life to look like now. And that can include, I only want to work this number of hours now, or I only want to work nights or mornings or half days, or I only want to work for 6 months and then take 6 months off.
Yeah.
Like we met some people in the south of France that do that. They create work and then they stop working for a few months. I was like, this is great. So you could make that decision now, because you can make a profitable business or career any way you like. But if you keep saying, well, it's only when you make a lot of money that you get to write the rules of your work week or the type of clients you take, or that's going backwards. I think you have to make those decisions now, and then you will build a business that you do love, that is more sustainable, and to your point, has the long game. And I think, you need patience. But if you are getting some of the benefits now already, it helps you wait for the full benefits to come.
Yeah, I love that. And it ties into something Shay said earlier. She used this word exponential. And, I set that whole thing up of like, we're going to grow slow and steady. We're going to take our time. We're going to get rich slow. We're going to, we're not going to be tempted to want that overnight success. But I think the irony of this, and the point that I really want to underscore for people listening, and I'm maybe just underscoring it for myself, is to remember that it might very much be slow and steady for those first few years. 2 to the second power is still just 4, and it's growing and it's growing and it's slow. But you extrapolate that, right? It's like any of those things that go around, occasionally of like, if you put an extra penny into compound interest, like, what do you think it is 100 days from now or whatever? And the number is always shockingly high. And it reminds me of a comparison of something I talk about in Slow Growth, where I talk about weeds and flowers and trees, where it's all very tempting for us to want to grow like weeds because they pop up overnight out of nowhere. They're suddenly 6 feet tall. There's a whole field of them where there was nothing before. It's like wildfire. They're everywhere. The whole conversation revolves around this fleeting currency, how fast, how much, overnight, how quickly, whatever. And you compare that to something like a redwood giant, which is just like chugging along over there, and it feels like this is like watching dust settle. It's so boring. But you play that timeline out and suddenly it starts multiplying really quickly. And it not only multiplies quickly, it's built to last. It stands for something for generations.
Mm-hmm.
So
it reminds me of I don't know, Graham, you might remember better than I do if it's Jay Abram, is that his name? He has a quote or a concept that he talks about the shelf life of your business, like the amount of time it took to build it is likely going to mirror. Is that I don't know if I'm thinking of the right person.
Yeah, it's one of those early execs at Facebook. Blanking on his name right now.
I find that concept fascinating and incredibly encouraging.
Yeah.
That the businesses that pop up overnight and are like wildly successful overnight, maybe it will last, but there's a very good chance that based on the how and the pace, that it's not going to, how long it lasts is going to mirror how long it took to build it.
Yeah.
And so I've taken some courage in that, and I've seen it be true. I think when you're building slow and steady, you're putting in deep roots, you're creating systems and processes that are sustainable. You're selecting carefully and intentionally. And that does create a business that has a little more resilience.
Yeah.
Right now we're all facing that, going through 2 years of a pandemic. Like, how resilient is my business? How intentional have I been about the different ways I'm going to collect income? I'm going to build revenue. Like, was I strategic and specific about that? Anyway, so I always find that to be very, very interesting. But the other, like the component I think that is a thread underneath all of this is how our false belief that it has to be now. It has to be now. Like, I'm at my peak now. And that has a lot to do with our culture and how we value youth over wisdom and how we value, so you'll hear single people say like, well, I might as well just work all my hours because I'm not married, or people who don't have kids say, well, I mean, what else would I do with my time? I don't have kids yet. So I might as well just dump myself all the way into this. And then, you have young married people saying like, well, we foolishly think we're at our smartest and sharpest now, just because we value, as a culture, we value that. So I'm always really encouraged by like the Michael Hyatts and the Brene Browns and the people that have just been around. They have so much more wisdom. They have so much more experience. So it's helpful for me to not look at this time and be like, this is when I'm going to be at my peak. This is what I've got to make it happen now while we're young. And I've got to make it happen, while I have all this energy. And I don't think about the fact like, man, I'm going to be a little more ripe. I'm going to be a little more wise. I'm going to be a little more settled. I'm going to be a little more secure in who I am. I'm going to have put in a lot more hours of work. 10, 15, 20 years from now might actually be my peak, not now. So I don't want to sacrifice everything under the assumption that like, it has to be now. Now I'm at my best now. Yeah. I just want to make those investments and like, how do I take care of the business and myself so that there's opportunity that like maybe the best years are actually ahead of me if I don't burn myself out now.
Yeah.
Maybe this isn't my best business idea. Maybe my best business idea is 20 years from now. Yeah. Maybe it's like when I'm 80 sitting on a rocking chair.
Yeah. That's really good.
Takes a little pressure off to me.
Yeah. And I just love that zoomed out long haul view. There's a part in Slow Growth where I'm talking about God and his like infinite and instant power. And that, he could have with like a clip, snap of the finger, 10 universes spinning at the end of every one of his fingertips. And yet he sits with me and like patiently waits for me to work on being a little less selfish, a little less
so great
comparison or whatever. And I say this God with infinite, instant, now power somehow fell in love with the process of how. you know?
Yep.
And there's just something beautiful about that, about like repeating that kind of rhythm in our lives, that we were not put here to figure it out on day 200, which I guess would be like year one still, but you know what I mean? Day 2000, whatever. And then that's just it. We're done for the rest of our lives. What a sad approach to life that would be if we had nothing else to learn.
Absolutely. And I think about in Genesis, like, why did God even take 7 days to create? Like, he could have just done it all in one day, but there was a savoring, I think, that even God was doing.
Yeah.
You know, he created this aspect and then he said, it's good. And he like enjoyed it for a minute.
Yeah.
And then he went on to the next thing. And like, we're just like, next, faster, better, more, faster, more, better, faster.
Yes.
It's instead of like, what about a little investment? Savor it. Little investment, savor it.
That's good. That's actually very convicting for me. I was just having this conversation with Justin where, you know, just about like dopamine tolerance and like, you know, oh gosh, like nothing good has happened. And Justin being like, actually 5 days ago, you got some of the best news of your life. It's like, oh, right. Whoops. Like just like how quickly we develop that like goldfish memory about what's working, and all we can kind of see is what's not. So one of the books you talk a lot about, Shay, that has really shaped your business. And, you know, you've shared that you kind of go away on these like retreats by yourself to think about playing out the next year of the business, is the book Traction. So just talk a little bit about that book and some like key takeaways you think about when you're doing those kind of planning retreats.
Yeah. I loved the book Traction specifically during a season of life when I was learning to build a business with a team. So if you are not in that space and you're a solopreneur, and let's just say there's so many wonderful things about being a solopreneur. I don't think the goal for everyone is to build a team. In fact, Graham hears me all the time about how complicated it gets when you have a team and how slow things get when you have a team. And also having a team is great too, but just preface there, being a solopreneur can be awesome. But because I was working 16 hours, the only way that working 16 hours works for me is if I have a team. This is a place where Graham and I are actually really different. I don't mean to get on a tangent here, but Traction is a helpful book for a specific group of people during a specific season of business, I would say.
Yeah.
So, let me finish the thought on Traction. It really does help you to establish systems. It really does help you to understand organizational structure and accountability and goals and sort of like how to lead a team towards meaningful key performance indicators and benchmarks for growth, and how to think big picture about revenue goals and then work backwards into tangible action steps, who to hire, simplifying in your org chart, all of that. So that's why Traction is just easy to understand for that. And it was a great book for me when I was moving into that season. Now, with that said, in the context of this conversation, you don't necessarily need a team. You can have a very wildly successful business and still barely work any hours. Enter Graham Cochrane, depending on the type of business. Now, I cannot run the business that I have in 16 hours a week with no one and have it be as profitable as it is. I guess I technically probably could, but I would like put in 3 new images to the catalog a month or something like that. Yeah. So I guess anything's possible, but it's really not possible for me to operate at this level without a team. So that's like needs to be said. Graham, on the other hand, has the type of business that he can scale it without people. It's a knowledge-based business. He just has to put in the work to create the education content, and then it can continue to sell. My business model is totally different. We both work very minimal hours, but mine requires a team. His does not necessarily. So wasn't a direct answer to your question, but Traction is an awesome book if you are moving into that season where you need a team. With that said, that doesn't have to be the goal.
Love that. Let's talk about that. So Shay is 16 hours a week with a team. Graham, about how many hours a week are you working with no team?
So I technically have 2 businesses. One I handed off finally last year to my business partner, so he runs that, and so that takes no hours, but I make less money in that business. But my personal brand that I'm running now, last I calculated, it's about 6 hours a week. That it requires of me. Like right now in this season with a book coming out, I'm doing interviews like this and on more podcasts. And cool things like that. But that doesn't have anything to do with running my business. It's more of just getting the book out. So yeah. And if I'm not building something new, if it's just like maintenance mode, which most of the time it is, 6 to 10 hours a week would be it.
Yeah, I love it. So let's dig in. Let's talk some more specifically from this book, which is called How to Get Paid for What You Know, Turning Your Knowledge, Passion, and Experience into an Online Income Stream in Your Spare Time, which I feel like at this point people are like, okay, I'm starting to wrap my head around this. This sounds good. Tell me more. But they're also probably thinking some doubts at this point. And you cover this in the book. And the number one doubt, we'll talk about two of them. We'll talk about two important doubts. One of them is probably, that's great for these guys. They seem to be very business savvy. They seem to be very confident. They're creative. They are
must
just
be
like,
nice.
Yeah, the must be nice doubt.
Mhm.
And then the other side is like, okay, even if I can wrap my head around doing this, like who's going to pay me? Who's going to pay me? I feel like a fraud. And who's going to pay me? That's already out there. There's other people doing it. It's out there for free. So just address some elephants in the room before we even go any further.
Yeah, those are great questions, and I try to honor people who have those doubts because it just shows that they're really thinking about it seriously. And the most important thing, and I think I say this in the book, but the most important thing is not if you think something's possible, but is it possible for me? Right? You have to ask, is that possible for me? So that's why inspirational stories are only but so helpful, because you're like, well, that worked out for them, but is that possible for me? So yes, the answer is yes, it's possible for anybody who really wants it, just because of the business model and the way our culture is shifting to. People are just thirsty for more knowledge, and we're looking for in non-typical places. We're sort of eschewing the university track. Like, we're willing to learn from all kinds of people. The big one people have is like, but I'm not an expert. It's the imposter syndrome thing. And the Journal of Behavioral Science did an interesting study where 70% of all adults they studied, including professionals like doctors and lawyers, like marketing executives, 70% of adults feel like an imposter at their job. Yeah. So I think that, and I think the other 30% are just lying. Yeah. I think there's always one guy who's like, I'm the best. Right. But I think none of us feel like an expert. We all know we see our flaws, and we also are afraid of being found out. I think that's why the word imposter is real. And there's a lot of counseling work we could do there, but I think we all are putting on a front every day to just try to cope through life. And we're afraid of the real us being found out. And this manifests itself when it comes to educating or teaching, because someone would say, well, yes, I've gotten in shape and I know how to eat healthy, but who am I to teach other people that? Like, that's just some change I made in my own life or whatever it would be. And what I try to teach people in the book is that no one's looking for an expert. Yeah. The fear that you're not an expert is a narcissistic, self-obsessed fear that has nothing to do with serving other people. Other people don't care if you're an expert because they don't care about you. They care about themselves, no offense. And they just care about results. So can you help somebody is the better question. Yeah. Have you helped somebody in the past related to whatever you kind of know? You probably have. You're probably the person your friends come to that ask you questions. What should I do about this? Like, people ask Shay camera questions and photography questions. She could help people become photographers if she wanted to. People ask me about music recording. Like, what microphone should I buy? How do I record? People ask me about businesses. That's how I started this brand. People kept saying, how did you start your business? How could I do that? I'm like, well, yeah, you just do this, do that. Yeah. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to help get people results. Yeah, I love that you talk about it's like about that transformation. That's what they're really after, is not just like, and honestly, it's actually sometimes the opposite, right? Where it's like, if somebody feels like too much of an expert or too untouchable or too far ahead, they become too intimidating to learn from. It's like, well, and it becomes that whole like, well, sure, that works for you. We got that like in our photography business when we reached a certain point. It was like, sure, you can do that if you're Justin and Mary, but like, what about somebody who's brand new? And so there's something very valuable to being pretty close to just the other side of where your students are. One of the things that I think you actually have like a whole chapter where you walk people through figuring out what their course could be, what they're good at, what people are asking them for, how to do research on that, how to do research on the market they would be entering. And all of that is so valuable. They should check out the book for that. I want to talk about the heart side of it that I think is so beautiful that you just remind people of. And it was honestly a really beautiful reminder for me of, when we are building a business, the single best way to determine that it's going to be profitable is not by focusing on what we're going to get or what the pricing is going to be, what the numbers are going to be. That's important, but we focus on what we're going to give.
and how we can serve people, and like a business that is based around giving. You referenced the book Go Giver, which I love, and there's the law of compensation. Your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. Said another way, your compensation is directly proportional to how many lives you can touch. And I think they have a law of influence as well. That's like, you want to, have more influence, find more people to serve. So talk a little bit about when you think about building your business, starting from a core, and you even have a diagram if you want to talk about it, with the value circle of a flywheel of a business that is based around giving, and how that just turns into, suddenly you have a business and it's just a natural outpouring.
Yeah, thanks for the setup. I think this is the paradox of what online businesses who sell information products deal with. If I give away my information, I have nothing to sell. Right. Or why would people buy from me? And that's a scarcity fixed mindset statement or fear. And it's totally normal. It makes total sense. Thank God somehow I didn't think like that when I started. I thought the opposite, which was no one will know I exist unless I put out lots of information on the internet that's discoverable. I need to be everywhere. So that people even know I exist, to even have a chance to sell something to them. I think, in the book, like I talk about how there's these 6 steps to launching your business. And I don't even get to product creation or selling until step 4 or 5. Right. And I joke about that. Like, how much of the book have you read? And I haven't even told you how to sell something yet or what to sell. Right. And the point is that it doesn't matter what you sell. It matters that you have an audience. Mm-hmm. That's the most important asset for any brand, any business, is an audience of people that love you and like you. And how do you build an audience? Well, you have to be a giver. You have to be a giver. That The Go Giver is the best book I've ever recommended that anybody should go read, whether you're in sales, you work in corporate America, or you have your own business. It's all about not whether this will be profitable. Is that a bad question? It's just a bad first question. That's what he says, right? Bob Berg. He says, it's really about, will this serve? Yeah. And if everything you do every day in your business truly helps and serves people, you're sniffing on the right trail. You're on the right trail because it's going to leave a lasting impact. It's going to make people feel like when they interacted with you, whether it was in a simple social media post or a YouTube video or a podcast like this one, they walk away feeling like, wow, Mary, she's awesome. Like, I really enjoyed my time listening to that episode. I like her. I want more of what she has. That's hard to quantify, hard to track in a spreadsheet, but that is the secret to making people continue to pay attention, continue to trust you, to continue to follow what you're doing. So I teach this in the value circle, which is just a simple, like, everything you do should be valuable and be centered on value. And there's 4 steps. It's one is you give value for free first. You should always be the first person to give in the relationship. Don't ask them for money. Give them something first. I do that with YouTube videos, podcasts, blog posts, helpful emails that are free. I give away mini courses and downloadable guides and frameworks for free, just all the time. Go take this free thing, let it change your life, and then be like, wow, if that's what he gives away for free, I wonder what like his coaching is or his courses are like. And so you've given value first, then they're interested in buying something from you. And that better be valuable too, which it will be if you have a heart and a soul and you know what helps people. And then you give value after the sale. You don't just take their money and say, we did it. We made a transaction. You over deliver. How could you surprise and delight them after the sale? So they're like, oh, this is so cool. Like, there's a company called Sweetwater that's an audio gear company. They just sell microphones and computer stuff all the time. And they pack candy in their boxes. So when you open up, there's always this candy spilled around. My kids know about Sweetwater because, like, Dad, did you get more candy? Yeah. Like, it's kind of a running joke, but it's a little over deliver. That's a simple, cheap, easy idea. But anything you could surprise and delight. I like to give people like bonus courses they didn't know they were going to get when they buy one of my courses or something like that. Yeah. And so you've given value in 3 stages before you ever really receive the value, which is income or payment. And then you get testimonials, you get referrals, because people, their experience with you is like, dude, Mary just gives. She gives and gives and gives. I could listen to her podcast and just learn and apply. I don't even have to buy her book. Then if I buy her book, like, there's so much more value in the book than what I paid for the book. Like, that experience is what builds. If you have a long game, it doesn't make you money quickly. That's right. Going back to that point. But if you have a long game in view, you can build a brand that is so beloved by people, and an audience that will do anything you ask them to do, support you in any way you ask them to support you. And the audience is the asset, because then you can build any kind of product or service you want.
Yeah.
And people will buy it.
Yeah. I love that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love that we're talking about using the word value here, because I think this ties back into, Mary, kind of some of the deeper heart issues that you were alluding to in the intro to this, and where we find our identity. Yeah. And I think that a lot of times it's easy to use your business to prove that you have value. You're working a lot of hours.
Yeah.
You're actually using and manipulating your business to get value. I'm going to work 40 hours. That means I'm busy. That means I'm important. That means I have a lot, I'm awesome. I need to be working 40 hours. We're trying to suck value out of our business to cover up the holes of insecurity and shame or things like that we feel, instead of looking at it as, how can I give the most value? Because giving the most value, you can give a lot of value in a very finite amount of time, right? That's a podcast instead of a book. You can give a ton of value in a small amount of time. So then it's less about, I'm working all of this, I'm working all these hours so that I feel good, so that I feel valuable. And like, I can actually give enormous value in a very small sliver of time, which ironically also makes you more valuable. So I think that that's just, that value piece is an important one. And I think that mindset that Graham's talking about of delivering value and being creative about how we can deliver value, it removes the conversation of how many hours I'm working and whether it's a 40-hour week job or a 10-hour week job or whatever it is. It really just becomes about, how can you deliver the most value in a small amount of time?
Yeah.
And not use your business, not use your work and the world to like make yourself feel valuable by working 1 million hours a week.
Yeah, I love that. I want to read a couple of quotes from the book where Graham talks about this. He says, it takes way more creativity and diligence to stop doing #all the things, evaluate what activities in your business actually lead to more consistent sales, and then do only those things. So that's what I do. And it turns out it's a lot easier than most think to grow your income while working less. And then to kind of like pair on that, you are talking about the good PR agent that hustle has in the world. You say, we elevate people who work hard. We celebrate the #hustle on Instagram. We admire people who forsake everything else and grind it out for the success and wealth. We've glorified workaholism by giving it better PR. And I just wrote down, dang, when I read that part. So in kind of like wrapping up, because man, I could talk to you guys all day. I just want you to leave with this idea that Graham talks about in the book, but I know, Shay, you subscribe to it too. This idea that content is generous and generosity is magnetic. And Graham, you actually have a Bible verse you reference that I'll have you talk about from Proverbs about the biblical basis for why that's true.
Oh man, yeah, I snuck this in there to end the book here, because this is the verse for my entire business, right? Proverbs 11:24-25, I think it is. One gives freely, yet grows all the richer. Another withholds what he should give and only suffers want. It's this paradox Solomon is saying, right? That, man, the way to wealth, the way to growth, the way to having all you could ever imagine or hope or dream is actually to be willing to give it all away.
Yeah.
Jesus backs us up. It's more blessed to give than receive. The Apostle Paul quotes him as, and there's so many paradoxes in the scriptures about like, what does that mean? And I think about people in my life who are givers. They're willing to pay for my meal. When I need to move, they're going to show up. I know they're going to show up. If I need someone to babysit my kid, I'll be there. And it's costing them something and they would rather do something else. But what are my feelings toward that person? Oh, they're amazing.
Yeah.
Like, those people are all, and why do I feel that? It's because they're generous. I may not think about it directly, but generosity is magnetic. So why don't we do that for ourselves in our own businesses? Why don't we give so much so that people are attracted to us? This isn't weird. This isn't manifestation. This is just, we like people who are generous. We don't like people who are selfish, and we don't have to think about it that hard. It just happens. And so, gosh, it's not much of a tactic for business because it's not, again, measurable and quantifiable. And we're Westerners. We really like those types of things, but it is truth because it's the way God designed us.
I love that. Shay, what would you add to that for your business when you think about generosity?
I think that one thing that helps to fuel what we're doing, and as image creators. Okay. Images can seem like such a vain, superfluous thing, pretty things like that's ideal and pretty things. But if I can remember that those pretty things enable women to succeed in business, and how the world is a richer, better place when women succeed in the workplace for a million different reasons, then it makes it a little bit easier for me to value the work that I'm doing for what it is.
Yeah.
When I know that what we're doing, what we're giving is actually important on a global scale, right? It's important to humanity that women succeed in business, that their ideas and their passion and their perspective of the world are seen and heard and have a place in the marketplace. So generosity for me in the context of images has to go many layers below images and Instagram and social media posts and, stock photography, and with what it is that we're really giving, which is opportunity, help, encouragement, a fighting chance at success in business, a voice. We're giving people images to pair with a voice and a message and a product of value, a service of value. So when I think of generosity in the realm of styled stock, I have to go right back to our mission of like what we're doing through imagery.
Yeah. I love that. Well, you guys are incredible. You are incredibly generous. You are incredibly magnetic. I could spend all day with you, but I know we all got to go. So let them know where they can find you guys. Graham, let them know where they can find the book. I understand, Shay, that there's a trial for Social Squares. Like, tell us all the good things.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the book, like you said, you teed it up so nicely. Oh my gosh, I was like, wow, I wrote that stuff. That sounds good. How to Get Paid for What You Know. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you buy books. Or if you go to grahamcochrane.com/book, we'll leave that link too. They can get $100 worth of pre-order bonuses, or if it's past the pre-order, you can still get the bonuses, some extra goodies there just for bringing your receipt there and checking out the book.
Awesome.
Yeah, and if you're a small business owner that needs images to show up online, then check out Social Squares. It's just a styled stock membership that serves specifically the female small business community. You can find us on Instagram as @Social Squares. You can sometimes find me on the internet as @Shay Cochrane, maybe twice a month might be my average. And yeah, we have a free trial for anybody listening that is like, I would love to work less and save time and actually still be able to do, what I need to do. There is a free trial to the Social Squares membership, and the address for that I know we'll put in the show notes, but it's socialsquares.com/Mary Marantz, and is a $1 trial to get into the membership and see if we can kind of maybe help you dial back the hours you're investing in work, do more important things, or go get a facial.
Yeah.
Even that.
That's right. I love it. All right, friends. The book is How to Get Paid for What You Know, turning your knowledge, passion, and experience into an online income stream in your spare time. And it's out everywhere books are sold on March 22nd. Make sure you get that in your hands. Make sure you are following both Shay and Graham if you want to be inspired weekly, or maybe every other week, by what it looks like to run your business like a CEO, but more importantly, to build a business that serves your life and others, not the other way around. Here's to shaking off hustle and what the world says success looks like, and growing slow and steady to build a life that you love. Until next time, friends, this is The Mary Marantz Show.